Welcome to the State of Crypto Policy Summit. Please welcome to the stage your host, Nick Day.
Good morning. Am I loud? Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really cool that we have people standing. We do have a couple empty seats open, so if y'all are tired, feel free to take a seat. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here back at our annual policy summit here on the Money Reimagined stage at Consensus 2024 in Austin. That's a hell of a mouthful. You know, every year my colleagues and I talk about how important policy issues are for the upcoming year and how important they were the previous year. I think this might be the most important year yet as we watch the European Union implement its markets and crypto asset infrastructure, as we watch the US elections, as we watch the IRS work on this tax approach. And so we're gonna be talking about all of these things and more today. My name is Nick Day. Thank you all for joining us. And we're gonna get things started right now with commissioners from the SEC and CFTC, SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce and CFTC Commissioner Summer Mersinger. It's really nice to have walk-on music. I'm not used to that. Yeah, I really want to just get right into it. You know, we talked before about how we don't want to just do another round of SEC versus CFTC, you know, who would be better. But let's...
I thought we were going to have a cage fight.
This evening, we will be doing that. So. But yeah, no, maybe let's just get things started right away. I actually do want to let you open the floor. This morning you announced a potential sandbox or an idea for a sandbox between the US and the UK. I just want to give you a chance to just walk through it and basically talk about what you're envisioning and how you see this playing out.
Yeah, thanks Nick, and thanks to all of you. It's great to see you all here. It's great to be here at Consensus. I do want to give my disclaimer, which is that my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners. And that is relevant to what you just mentioned. I wrote a comment letter in connection with a consultation that the UK did around their digital securities sandbox, which is, as they propose to construct it, only open to UK firms. And I suggested, hey, why not open it to US firms too? Let firms from the UK try things in the US and firms from the US try things in the UK. We can have double the data coming from those experiments. And so in order to do that, what I suggested the SEC do is create a micro innovation sandbox in the US, which would allow people, and this is not limited to crypto, but would allow people to come in, set their own conditions for trying something, try it under certain activity ceilings, and then work toward more permanent relief in the form of a no action letter or exemptive order. One of the problems that we've had is that people have tried to come into the SEC to get relief, but you sort of come in and nothing happens. This would force the SEC's hand a little bit. So that's what I put out there late last night.
Gotcha. So I want to bring you in as well. One of the questions I think a lot of people have is just looking at this idea of working with the agencies over the coming months. What do you see as the most productive steps forward for either or both agencies to take to just try and better work with the industry, or at least better communicate with the industry about the questions that the people here have been asking about how they can comply with certain regulations and rules?
Yeah, and I'll give my disclaimer too. I'll try to do it quick since Hester already gave hers, but the views I expressed today are my own and not necessarily those of my fellow commissioners or the CFTC. I think one of the tools that I have been asking for, and this fits really in kind of the DeFi community, but I think it can be more broad, over any of the newer asset classes and markets we're seeing, is, have public roundtables. It's a good way to have these conversations. It helps kind of get information out to everyone as to what we're dealing with as regulators, what some of the regulatory questions are, how current players are looking at this, how new entrants might be looking at it. And it really kind of helps us lay out the issues that we need to address. We did this with FTX. And it brought a lot of interesting concerns and issues with our current regulations and what they were trying to do forward. But I also think, we should keep doing that, because a lot of times what I'm seeing right now is, any policy discussion that we have around some of the newer asset classes, or whether it's DeFi or a crypto market, it's all coming out in our enforcement cases. And to me, that's not a public policy discussion at all. So I really think that we could use the opportunity, we have the authority to do it, to hold more public roundtables and bring stakeholders together and have those conversations out in the public.
Yeah, and I think I would second that. I think public roundtables are a great idea. Joint CFTC, SEC roundtables would be helpful, just to air what the ideas are and put us on the same page in terms of thinking through those issues. It doesn't seem to be the direction that we're going these days, but it would be very easy to turn that on if the attitudes at our agencies changed.
Yep.
So kind of jumping on this engagement idea, obviously one of the things we're watching at CoinDesk is what's happening in Congress, and in particular with legislation that's going through the House and maybe to the Senate. And without asking you to comment specifically on legislation, I'm just kind of curious if you can speak to what kind of engagement you're having with lawmakers, if they're asking questions about, best approaches or better approaches to different questions that they might have as they try to wrap their heads around, how to craft a framework for the agencies to address this market.
Well, yeah, we've both talked to lawmakers. That's not unusual for either members of Congress to ask us to come up, or in other situations where we sit down and have those discussions. I think we have seen kind of a shift, or I've seen a shift over the years of first being very skeptical of a number of the crypto coins and even blockchain, and now that they've kind of embraced it, this idea that, yeah, we do need a framework to provide some clarity for those who are looking to follow the laws, but the laws just are not keeping up with technology. And I think Congress has been working really hard at trying to come up with an appropriate framework. And personally, I've seen things that I'm surprised by. One of them is seeing the House Financial Service Committee work directly with the House Agriculture Committee to come up with a bill. That doesn't happen very often. In fact, we see legacy issues from Dodd-Frank because those two sections of the bill, the CFTC oversight, was handled by the agriculture committees, not the financial services and the banking committees, and it was very different. And there was not a lot of talking back and forth, where here they really put their heads together and came up with some solutions. So it's great to see that, and I think it just shows that there really is interest and desire to have a framework and provide clarity in these markets.
Yeah, and I think I'm encouraged to see so much interest in Congress on these issues. Certainly they do talk to us, although I have to say that I think some of the reason we are in the place we are is because Congress got sick of looking at the SEC doing what it was doing, which was not providing clarity to people, and so they came in and they said, all right, we're just gonna do this ourselves, and that actually is not unprecedented. It happens a lot with respect to capital formation more generally, not just crypto related. The Congress has come in and said, we gave you the authority, we gave you exemptive authority to allow new things to come into the markets, to allow small businesses to raise capital with a lighter regulatory framework. And you SEC chose not to use that authority that we gave you. So yeah, we'll come in and we'll write a law and we'll tell you how to do it and we'll order you to do it. And I think we're seeing sort of a similar dynamic play out in the crypto world. And on the one hand, that's great, right, that Congress is taking the interest, but on the other, it's a sad reminder that we're not taking advantage of those flexibilities that Congress gave us to really think through difficult problems and think about how the law should apply to difficult, new, challenging things. And that is, I think, the whole idea of having regulatory agencies is that they can put their heads down, talk to people in the industry, talk to investors, talk to investor advocates, who, talk to lots of people in the public and think through difficult legal and technical issues. We're not doing that.
Well, that's a good point, and that's one thing I often, remind people that, at least from my personal kind of background, new law isn't always a good thing. In fact, sometimes that's not a good thing at all. People talk about Congress not doing anything, and sometimes I'm like, that's okay. We don't need a lot of new laws when we have a lot on the books and we can use those, and Congress in a lot of times gave us the flexibility to use our statutes in a way that can foster innovation. The problem here is that's not what we've done. The two agencies have kind of taken an enforcement first approach, and so Congress has had to step in. So it's good that Congress is working together and being, really spending time on this, but I really wish we didn't have to go down this road. I don't like new laws, but that's where we are.
So, well, just to kind of follow up on that a little bit, we are kind of in this place where we're watching this bill. We were talking yesterday with Congressman Patrick Henry and Congressman Tom Emmer, and it's really unclear the extent to which the FIT 21 bill, for example, will go through the Senate. But hypothetically, if it does, I was wondering, just to go deep into the weeds a little, if you could just talk through what the next steps might be. I'm sure there's a public rulemaking, public feedback comment period. Could you just walk us through what that would look like, or what that could look like for both of your agencies?
Yeah, it depends how the law ends up coming out.
Right.
And typically, if you have something happen in the House, you have something happen in the Senate, then people come together and they try to come to an agreement on what that looks like. But Congress can just say, we're putting this into law and it's effective immediately. But typically what happens with a big piece of legislation like this is that there'll be directives to the agencies. Either joint rulemaking, or each of you go off and do your own piece. And that would be through a notice and comment process where the public can weigh in. But there often are triggers put in so that we can't just drag our feet forever. So I would assume if something like this were to pass, our two agencies would sit down together and talk through some of that. We did a lot of that around Dodd-Frank, where our two jurisdictions intersect with each other, and so it was really important for us to work together on those things. So I assume a similar process would happen.
Yeah, and one thing to remember though, if you think legislation takes a long time, rulemaking takes a long time too, and some of the Dodd-Frank rules, we're
not done yet.
We're not even done. And so, that could be what we're faced with. It depends on, again, as Hester said, how this law comes out of Congress, if it does. But there will be things that we know we have to do right away, and I think certainly if there is a requirement for us to do joint rulemaking, a lot of times that is one of the first things that gets done. So I would be hopeful that the leadership of the two agencies could bring us together and do that rulemaking first. But yeah, rulemaking is a slow process, and it's you think the law is signed in, the president signs it, it's all done. That's just step one, and then it really gets to the kind of where the rubber meets the road. So it could take a while to get the rules done.
Just kind of also, again, going deep into the weeds here. Obviously, with a lot of public rules, we see feedback from members of the public. I've read many of the feedback to various proposals and NPRMs. What would be helpful from maybe your perspective for people to actually include just generally when they're responding to proposals? Because a lot of times we get form letters and I just see, please stop the SEC from banning Ether, which, it seems a little less than helpful for, feedback purposes. What would be more helpful for, for your agencies?
From my perspective, if you can provide data that's helpful, that may not be as relevant here, but also just a personal experience of what you as a company or you as an individual are dealing with that can be meaningful. And if there's something, often these proposals are very long and have hundreds of questions and people get overwhelmed. But if there's something that's unique to you, where you think, this particular question is one that I really care a lot about, you've got to figure out a way to underscore that. There often will be industry letters that will highlight a lot of the big issues, but if there's something that's specific that will make or break your business, let us know. That's the time to do it. And I always say, write a letter that has an executive summary at the beginning so that people know what's there. That's a very basic thing, but it can be very helpful. And then follow up with a visit to visit the staff or the commissioners at the agency to highlight your letter, to bring attention to it. Anyone can come in and talk to us, right? So that you take advantage of that that's what our government is for, right? To have that back and forth.
The other thing I always encourage people is, don't ignore the things that you think are good. Obviously you want to focus on concerns and be very specific in your concerns, but don't ignore the stuff that you think is good and that is helpful, because you just never know if someone else is going to take the other side of that and somehow that gets pulled from the rules. So don't ignore the good parts and just highlight the bad. Highlight the things that work and be specific about the things that don't work, because again, you've got people on both sides of almost every aspect of these rules, and you want to make sure people know when, you don't want something to come out of a rule because somebody else said it was bad and you didn't happen to mention how it would be helpful to your business or your industry in particular.
Thank you. So just for context, I read a lot of these comments just for reporting purposes, and so for everyone out here, data, personal statements, personal experiences, highlight the good, executive summaries. Please stop using the AI stuff. I want to switch gears a little bit. Obviously, enforcement has been a big topic for a while now, but one thing that struck me, so last year I was watching the Sam Bankman-Fried trial. I was in court every day. And one of the really interesting closing statements by the prosecutors was that this was not a crypto fraud, it was just a fraud with a crypto company. And I'm really curious, both your agencies have brought a number of enforcement actions, some of which I think are in similar veins where, the alleged defendant is promising some crypto return, investment, something, but never actually got to the crypto part of it. And so I'm just curious how you look at these, if you look at these as kind of exemplary of any kind of statement on the industry, or if it's just kind of, this is what happens with, the internet. So.
Yeah, I always look at it as people will use whatever the hot topic of the day is to rip people off. And so crypto, COVID, those were two that, now it's AI. And again, I'm not condemning anyone who uses those terms, but people start throwing in the hot terms of the day, and all they're trying to do is run away with people's money. So, I think instances like that, it's much easier for us to bring the case, but then they get marketed as being crypto cases, and so I guess that the industry can help us by identifying the frauds that they know are out there. I put in a plug. We both our agencies have whistleblower programs. You can file a whistleblower complaint if you see someone stealing people's money, and then if there is money recovered, you can get a piece of that.
Yeah, I think it's important that we start delineating between actual crypto fraud and just fraud, because we are starting to paint this picture of crypto is just fraud. And actually, FTX is probably closer to crypto fraud than most of the crypto fraud cases that we see, because nobody even buys any crypto. They are literally just taking your money, misappropriating it, putting it in their personal bank account. There was never any crypto purchased. They're just stealing your money. And to me, I think that needs to be kind of identified separately. Even yesterday, as of yesterday, our enforcement director at the agency said, 50% of our cases are crypto fraud, and I kind of challenged him to say, okay, but how many of those cases did anyone actually buy crypto? And I think it would be a much lower number. So I want us to be, as an agency, to be a little more careful in how we are identifying and classifying these cases, because fraud is fraud, and you can't, just because there's a crypto wrapper, doesn't mean that you can call that crypto fraud. And I think it just puts a bad kind of stigma on the industry, and we need to start delineating between when there's actually fraud in crypto and when it's just the subject of the day that people are using to commit fraud.
Do you have a, I think every year we see the budgets, proposals from the agencies, and every year they kind of talk about needing more resources for crypto as an example of the types of fraud. And so, to your point just there about, is it fraud or is it a crypto fraud, or, how do you see kind of, that negotiation? Is it just, do you have to use the keywords to try and get more resources from Congress, or will it actually help with kind of more specific targeting of enforcement actions?
Well, I've always found, I actually, my previous career was in Congress, and so I've found that the agency is always going to ask for more resources, regardless of the type of fraud that's coming in the door. And I don't think any one particular, subject is really going to sway Congress that much, because they're balancing a lot of other funding questions. And so, I've sat down with appropriators who have said, we'd love to give your agency more resources, but you have to understand, we have budget caps, we have, requirements in other funding areas within this bill, and we are maxed out as far as what we can give you. So I think, when we're asking for resources from Congress, we have to be really careful in what we're asking for. I do get worried when we go up and say, we want this jurisdiction and we're going to need, 3 times the resources that we have now. I think that's dangerous. I think we need to be able to go up and say, here's what we can do with the resources we have. Here's what we're able to do. And, let Congress judge how they want to grow our agency from there. I'm always very hesitant to say, give us more resources because of X, Y, and Z, because I think you are locking yourself into how you can use those resources, but you're also, setting up an expectation where, that funding, that comes with accountability, and you have to be prepared to live up to that accountability as well. And I'm more like, let's get the authority, or let's see what we can do with what we have now, and then decide from there what our budget looks like and work with Congress.
Yeah, I think Summer is really right about that. And one thing that has bothered me about the requests that are based on things like saying, hey, we need to bring crypto enforcement cases, if we were really thinking about this from a budget perspective as well as just from a pragmatic perspective, we would say, all right, let's sit down and think about when we need to take that enforcement hammer out, because that can be a very expensive hammer for us to wield. And when can we solve problems through guidance, or through writing a new rule, or through actually working with people using our exemptive process? And I think if we were willing to take a more holistic view of what we're doing, and we're willing to pick carefully which tool we use, then we could actually save our enforcement resources for going after the people who are really the wrongdoers, and concentrate on using our other tools to work with people to get them to a compliant place, and that's a lot cheaper than trying to take out the enforcement hammer.
Gotcha. So we have a few minutes left. I want to talk about kind of more recent activities, and in particular with the CFTC. So you have a proposal out now on the role of events contracts and prediction markets, and some of the arguments were specifically around political prediction markets and whether allowing them makes the CFTC a election cop, basically. And I'm just really curious if you could talk a little bit to your views on this, and what you were talking about during that meeting.
Yeah, this is a really tough issue. First and foremost, Congress gave us the authority to regulate these markets. So at the end of the day, these are legal markets, and I think I have to repeat that a lot in the agency. These markets aren't people just coming in and doing illegal things. It's part of our statute, and so we have to look at our statute and tailor our regulations in such a way that we're following Congress's direction. And I think our approach has really been, we don't like these, so we're going to see how we can get rid of most of these contracts from our regulated space. To me, then you're just driving all of this offshore, which is more concerning when you're talking about US investors who do want to participate in these markets. So I was frustrated with our rulemaking. I spent a lot of time on this from when we first had kind of a term sheet to a proposal. I thought my ideas were really good for ways we could better tailor it. But we really took a broad stroke and tried to call election prediction contracts as gaming. We made this broad kind of definition of gaming so that we can almost say anything we want is gaming. And ban it under that category. And then we also said, oh, and by the way, we don't have to do any kind of public interest determination. We can just say this is gaming and so you can't list it. That's not what the statute said. That's not how Congress directed us. And so I think we are taking a very dangerous approach to regulating these. I worry that this could end in a lot of litigation. We're already in litigation over these issues. And again, these are legal markets. So we need to approach them as such. So it was a hard rulemaking. It's going to continue to be a difficult topic. We're seeing more and more interest in it, more people coming in to register to do this. And we just have to come up with a solid approach to how we are going to regulate and make sure it follows the statute as Congress laid it out.
I'm just curious if you have any thoughts just following.
Oh, I have thoughts, but this is outside my jurisdiction, so I won't express them here.
That's fair. So as we close things out, I just want to give each of you a chance to just maybe, one message that you want to impart to, the audience here as we look at, it's going to be a weird couple months with the election, with the, legislative activities we're following, with the rulemakings we're following. If you have one message that you want to just let people, think about, things that they should weigh in on, anything at all.
Sure. So I'll just quickly say that, it's easy to get very discouraged about how things are. I know a lot of people are very excited because there's been some positive news in recent weeks, but do keep your eye on the goal, which is eventually to have a framework in place and think about what a good framework would look like. Try to develop that now so that when the appetite is there, you've got something ready to go. And don't give away everything that's important to you in the process of designing that framework. Really hold fast to the things that are important to you. Privacy matters, don't give that away. That would be my advice. And happy to talk with you about any ideas you have.
I would just say use your voice. And I think this industry has really grown in their way that they are communicating with policymakers and making a difference. At the end of the day, elections have consequences, and you all have a very important voice in our government. So use that voice. Make your thoughts known. Make sure whatever, if it's a candidate from like city council all the way up to president, be a part of that discussion. Don't be apathetic. Be involved. Use your voice. I think that's really important, and I think that's why we see this positive news coming and we see this kind of tide turning, because you're getting better and better at that. It helps us do our job. It helps Congress do their job, and certainly I think that's how we get to a better place.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have, but I want to thank both of you for joining us, and I want to thank all of you for sticking around to watch, and we'll be continuing this discussion, obviously. Thank you very much.